So please welcome AJ and Jesse. Rock on, guys. Good cut. Thanks. Good cut.
Hey, everybody. I don't know, can you hear me? All right, thank you so much for coming to Circulate. I hope you've been enjoying your time so far. Oh, God. We're going to change things up a little bit, and we're going to talk about millennials. So we're in a time where millennials are taking the workforce by storm, but it kind of seems like the only thing we hear about is how much they spend on avocado toast. I think now more than ever, it's important that seasoned marketers really understand their younger counterparts in order to work more effectively. So here with me today to talk about 10 ways in which you can work better with millennials is founder of Verma Media, a growth marketing agency that he's grown in profit from 0 to 2 million in under 2 years, and a contributor for publications like Forbes, Fortune, and the Huffington Post. Please help me welcome AJ Agrawal. All right. Hey, AJ, how you doing? How's it going?
Good. I love the fire GIF. It makes me feel like I'm in my living room.
Right? Is it GIF or GIF? I never really
GIF,
know.
GIF, whatever you want to call it. I like it. Yeah.
I love it. All right. So AJ and I have recently had the opportunity to talk about how marketers from all generations can really effectively work together. And we've actually come up with 10 ways in which you can bridge the gap. So I think maybe we should just get started and jump right in. What do you say?
Totally, yeah. So I wanted to start off with an interesting statistic. Thought Catalog interviewed a bunch of millennials, and they basically asked, what are the 2 main assumptions that you absolutely hate that your employer makes about you? Number 1 is that everybody 30 and under is super narcissistic. And number 2 is everybody 30 and under are social media experts. So the first one is not making assumptions about the generation.
Definitely. And then secondly, to work more effectively, try to proactively understand their strengths, and in turn, that's going to help them understand yours.
Totally. And then a really cool thing that we're seeing, especially among the millennial generation, obviously, is inbound marketing. So inbound.org did a huge study and found that of any other generation, millennials are the best at not only implementing, but getting an ROI on inbound marketing efforts. So just one example, but being really open to the new channels that we're talking about.
Right, definitely. And then from there, allowing them opportunities to gain buy-in, especially if you're on a larger team. Millennials like to feel important.
Definitely. And they're also very experienced with technology. Funny enough, I read something the other day that said the average millennial opens their phone 45 times a day. I kept track today myself. I'm at 53, so it's pretty embarrassing. But wow. Yeah, crazy high.
Next, we really think it's important to provide them the space to prove themselves.
Totally. And then an interesting statistic about millennials in the workplace, 38% that their biggest pet peeve with their employer was that they felt that they weren't getting the recognition that they deserve. So definitely recognition is super important among this generation.
And also challenging them, helping them understand like when it's okay to fail and when it's okay to, spread their wings and fly, really.
Totally, and I think that the generation of millennials, they're really good at bringing in new ideas, and so helping your brand stay fresh. I mean, 65% of millennials interact with their brands on social media right now. So if you're a brand out there thinking about harnessing that power, I think is super important.
Definitely, and lastly, do your best to try to view them as a peer and not a younger version of yourself. So we've covered these 10, not super in depth, but maybe we should take a deeper dive. So AJ, I would really love to start by knowing, what are some common misconceptions other generations have about millennials? And how do you think this hurts marketing teams?
Totally. So I think for us, the one I'd probably want to dive into the most is the whole idea that as a more seasoned marketer, you can just hire a millennial and then just pass off all your social accounts and then get an incredible ROI. I've learned a lot about this because our agency is heavily involved in influencer marketing right now. And so one of the first things that we did is we sat down with a bunch of influencers. And what I realized is that process to do it well is extremely hard. It's very different than if you were going to post on your social accounts. The average food blogger, influencer on Instagram, they probably put in 80 hours a week. They go drive to about 5 restaurants a day, editing their photos, posting them, responding to comments. That idea and generating income for you or your brand is very different than if you're just going to post on the side, post a bunch of pictures every day. And I think where the discrepancy comes in is we just see a lot of companies come in and say, oh, this person's a millennial. Let's just hand them their social accounts. And the problems with that is, A, it's not effective. B, the person in that job, if they're not really excited about it, they're miserable, and C, eventually they end up leaving the organization. So like just rephrasing that and making sure you have a conversation if they're passionate about it, you set proper deliverables, and in no way should you think like, oh, I hired this 27-year-old person to manage our accounts. Like, we're really good at social media. Like, that's just like the wrong mentality.
Definitely agree. And so most of you probably have a millennial on your team in some capacity. So we've made a lot of points about our perspective as millennials, but why should more seasoned marketers care about helping millennials?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for one, if you just look at technology, I don't know if like our marketing teams can operate without dealing with millennials at this point. I mean, you think about the fact that like 10 years ago, there were no phone apps. Now you look at like Instagram, Snapchat. I mean, you look at what's going on in VR, et cetera. A lot of millennials are pioneering those decisions and having huge movements within the industry. I think like where I've seen the drop off, speaking personally, and also with a lot of companies who are millennial led, is I think a lot of times for millennials, we're really good at finding new marketing channels. Where we struggle is taking those channels and then scaling them, or actually like converting those channels to getting a meaningful ROI. Like, how do you go from 50,000 Instagram followers to actually producing $50,000 on the bottom line for your company? That I think comes a lot more from experience and seasoned marketers. Like a recent example is we're working with a company now where it's a one-person team, and he has a dropship company, and he's doing 18 million in revenue a year, just insane numbers. But he has no idea where his customers are coming from. Right. So he's throwing money at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, SEO, no idea. His sales dipped. They brought in a veteran marketer, tracked everything, basically aligned him on set goals and deliverables, and his business is doing much better now. So I think when you put those two things together, it produces huge results. It's just kind of forming that relationship.
Definitely. So we touched on a little bit. It sounds like we've got some different viewpoints, right, between the generations. So what would you say is the difference really between a millennial view of marketing and then maybe more of a more traditional view of marketing?
Totally. I mean, I think there's a couple. I think the different viewpoints are kind of merging. I think conferences like these are amazing, where both viewpoints are coming closer together. I think the millennial generation is a lot more comfortable with inbound marketing, just because we've grown up at a time where it's so easy for me to avoid your ad. You have no idea. Like Netflix, when's the last time you saw a TV ad? Radio, I plug in my phone. I don't know the last time I listened to the radio. Even with Gmail, you have the promotion tab. It's never been so easy to just get away from ads. Right. And I think that idea of inbound is super interesting. We actually were working with a food delivery company, and we were talking to them about how they're picking their influencers to represent their brand. And they won't even pick influencers where over 10% of their posts are sponsored or advertorial in any way. And we asked why that is, and they said, we found that if over 10% of the posts seem promotional, that millennials and Gen Z, which is the age group under millennials, 20 and under, they just don't resonate with that brand.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so it looks like, unfortunately, we're running out of time in our quick little chat here. So I'd love to know, what would you say is most essential to bridge the gap?
Totally. I think what's been super helpful for me and our company, like at least in the past year, is seeing that like everything is a cycle. And what I mean by that is I was recently at a barbecue the other day, and my friend's daughter came up to me. She's 8 years old, and she's just showing me her Snapchat. And if you just watch like how somebody this young can operate Snapchat, I was like, oh my gosh, I should just hire this person to do our social media at 8 years old.
Only if she's passionate about it though, right?
Exactly, only if she's passionate about it. And then I thought to myself, like, this is how, seasoned marketers probably feel about millennials. And so I think technology is changing like crazy, we all know that, but we've seen this before, before there was TV, there was radio. Right. Before there was smartphones, there's desktop. And so now this is all, it seems like there's a lot to deal with in our generations, but we've all been through this before, and I think when you think of it in that lens, it's a lot easier to approach it and also deal with it and understand this is a good thing, and bridging the gap is so important. Definitely.
So we've got a couple seconds left. What is the piece of advice you want to leave our audience with today?
I would say if I could offer one piece of advice, and this is something I'm doing more now, is honestly, just kind of thinking of yourself back to the new and entry-level employees that you're hiring, like thinking back to yourself in their shoes. Like I remember for me, my first marketing job, I was unbelievably scared, like had no idea what I was doing, wearing a bunch of hats and was just freaking out. And I think we've all gone through that. And when you think of the differences in the generation, I mean, we've all been in those steps. Thinking through it, I think it makes it just so much easier for you to be relatable. Your employees will get along with you better, and I think overall you'll build loyalty better. So
Definitely. All right, well, that's the end of our time. Thank you so much, AJ, for your time.
Thank you.
If you want to chat with us a little bit more about millennials, we'll be at the networking break at
Definitely.
5:30.
All right, thank you guys.
Awesome, thanks everybody.
This chair, like